Listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello everybody and welcome once again to Teachers Talk Radio, live with you this evening to talk about an ongoing strike action at a school in Gloucestershire. And not just the strike action, we're actually going to talk about, I guess, the behaviour that leads to strike action, because there's been plenty of examples of this happening over the last year or two across the UK, really, of strike action around being taken around behaviour issues. So we'll dig into all of that. This particular case, though, that we're going to be talking about tonight is one in Gloucestershire. At Tewkesbury Academy, a group of teachers in Gloucestershire are on strike over what they say has been a failure of school management to address abusive pupil behaviour. And members of NASUWT, and I'm joined by Wendy Exton, who is a national executive member for NASUWT and can give us lots of insight into this particular case. NASUWT took the first of 5 planned strike days last Wednesday, the 4th. So I think that's still going on now, isn't it, Wendy?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We did 2 days last week.
Yeah, and it was a culmination of issues which we're going to discuss, but ITV, BBC have reported on it, and they've talked about threats of violence, derogatory language, verbal abuse from a minority of students. Teachers have spoken out as well. And there's a clip that you can find where they've spoken to BBC about some of the things they've experienced, and you can find that yourselves if you wish to. We'll talk about it here. And so I'll start off then, Wendy. Give us like the backstory on this. Give us why are these teachers on strike?
These teachers are on strike because they just want to do their jobs, and they are being hindered in doing their jobs. So every day is complete chaos within the school with this group of students that aren't attending lessons. They're roaming around the school, interrupting lessons that they're not part of, intimidating staff, intimidating students, and they've just quite frankly had enough. So this strike action is a last resort. Talks have been going on since November, and the behaviour just hasn't improved despite certain reassurances that the school have given us. So we've approached management with a list of what our members want, and they're refusing to engage in any dialogue with what would solve this strike action. But they just want to teach. They just want to get on with their jobs, and they've just had enough.
Before we go on, Teachers Talk Radio contacted the school for comment on this, and this is what the school have said. Some staff at Tewkesbury Academy have voted to participate in strikes organised by the NEU and NASUWT. This relates primarily to the management of behaviour of a small number of students and the implementation of approaches designed to improve standards for all children. We were surprised and saddened that the unions have opted for action, despite the significant progress that's been made in our talks. Nevertheless, our doors remain open. We will continue to engage in good faith to minimise any disruption for families and to ensure all children in our own town can enjoy a good education that sets them up for success in life. Now, Wendy, any reaction to that statement to begin with from the school? Because they're saying that progress has been made.
No, progress hasn't been made. And again, we've spent 6 hours today in talks with the school, and there is no movement on their stance. They refuse to take our members' concerns seriously, and behaviour I know that they state that things have improved, but I've got evidence from members that clearly states that there is a decline in behaviour even since last week.
What I'd like to know then, first off, is because in the statement and in the articles that have already been written about this, they've talked about the behaviour policy and the implementation of the behaviour policy. So,
Yeah.
what is going wrong here? What is in the behaviour policy?
Well, the behaviour policy on paper is fit for purpose. But what is happening is the classroom teachers are using the behaviour system, but once it leaves the classroom, this is where the issue is, because managers aren't applying that policy consistently or appropriately. So the school is saying that behaviour policy needs to be adapted for certain pupils. So the most extreme pupils are not being dealt with in the same way. Somebody who had just done something minor or was just having an off day. So as a result, these students don't know where the boundaries are because it's not being applied consistently. Staff have said time and time again they want a policy where it's very prescriptive as to what would happen if, for example, a child is abusive to a member of staff. They want to know what the lines in the sand are. Is that an exclusion? And that should be an exclusion for every student, regardless.
One of the members of staff who I saw interviewed said something along the lines of some children need to be excluded.
Yeah.
So is the school, sort of basically not excluding students who the staff feel should be excluded?
Yes. One of the members of staff who was interviewed by the BBC has been a teacher there for 30 years. And he was saying, that we've come to the end of the road with a number of students and they need to be permanently excluded in order to bring the others back on track. Because what other students are seeing is this group is getting away with things and they're joining because it's giving them kudos within the school to be part of this gang. And they feel that a permanent exclusion for, what is a small number of students, and then, applying the behaviour policy consistently to the remainder would work and even things out. And, being on the picket line last week, these were all experienced teachers that have been there for a long, long time. So they've seen the decline in the school. They're not just youngsters that are coming up and joining something because they aren't tolerating behaviour. They're experienced teachers that were on there.
When these students, because they claim that the students are sort of being abusive and so on towards them and, etc. What's actually happening instead then? Because they've said there's a difference between what's happening to the average students in the school and what's happening to this sort of small group who are almost being, reading between the lines, sort of let off stuff, or however you want to frame it. That's what they claim. What is actually happening then instead? Because something must be happening. Is it conversations? Is it, what system do they have in place? Because they must have said, this is what we're doing with these students.
Yeah, they're saying that they have this Key Stage 3 have somewhere called reset, and Key Stage 4 have reflection. And what happens is they tell these students, and they make their own way there. You're in reflection, and they're just roaming around the school, meeting up with their mates. So this is causing chaos because they're then screaming down corridors, barging into lessons, bullying any student that they may see along the way. And sometimes the school gives half a day exclusion and then they're back in the next day picking up where they left off because they know that nothing, concrete is going to happen to them.
Yeah. So just to rewind a little bit there, they're saying that when the actual teaching lessons are taking place, the staff are presumably going through some sort of warning system or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Then the staff is sending them to one of these rooms.
Yeah.
But you're saying that on the way, sort of they're just going off and doing whatever?
Yeah, they're going off and doing whatever. I had a message earlier from a member of staff who'd asked for support in the lesson because a child was being intimidating them, and they called for help and nobody had come. They called for help twice, and this child was then asked to leave the site eventually by a member of the leadership, and the child refused to go, and that was the end of the matter. So the children don't know, that they think that these issues, and they can behave as they want, and nothing is going to happen, nothing concrete. So this is where we are with it.
What sort of, I mean, again, do you know what is in the actual behaviour policy? Like, what is the behaviour policy? Does it look normal? Is it a normal policy? The actual policy they have, forgetting about the implementation, but the actual policy, is it a particular approach they're taking? Is it, how are they approaching, behaviour in general?
The policy, if you look at it and read it, it does appear to be standard run-of-the-mill one that you find in most schools, but they have this approach whereby they don't apply it consistently once it is beyond classroom level. So your teachers are following the warning system. If they've got a mobile phone out, the stages that they've got to go through. And if, they're carrying on disrupting lessons, then they call for, leadership, or they're sent to reset. And this is where it's going wrong, because there's not that consistency at leadership level.
Why do you think that is, though?
Because they've got it into their heads that, different pupils need different approaches. So the classroom approach is consistent, but beyond that, they're letting certain students do as they wish. Because
based on what?
Well, and this is a pet peeve of mine. I write on this frequently, and this is where they say behaviour is an SEND need. Now, yes, some behaviours are. You've got students that have got autism or ASD traits, and yes, that's fair enough. But being abusive and disruptive, in my mind, is not an SEN need. So therefore, that policy should be applied consistently. And this is where we're going wrong. So
is that, again, without, you can answer it without reading between the lines. Are you saying that, these students, the school are saying that these students have SEN needs, and therefore they need to have maybe a different approach, or an approach that doesn't involve an exclusion or whatever else?
Yeah, exactly. And every time I raise this, I've been going on about this since November with this school. And every time I mention it, they say you can't discipline a child into compliance.
Okay.
But children need boundaries. They need to know that teenagers, they test boundaries. That's what they do. But they need to know boundaries, and they need to know what they can and can't do.
When you said the
approach is not helping.
When you've said the discipline into, they've said that you can't discipline into compliance.
Yeah.
So what are they saying does work then?
They haven't got a concrete answer for that. They haven't, and when I raise the issue about, some of these students have come to the end of the line, we can't permanently exclude them because they'll be vulnerable in the community. I get that. There isn't the specialist provision for them to be part of. Tewkesbury is nowhere near pupil referral units. There's always an excuse, and we've got to do this. It's our ethos to do this, to keep these students within the school, but at what cost? And this is my issue with it.
I mean, you've touched on a few of the behaviours that have been exhibited, but probably more in a general sense. I mean, can you give us some examples of the sort of things these teachers are dealing with sort of on the regular here in lessons?
Well, there is an issue, as there is in a number of schools, with misogyny from male students. So, they do get a lot of misogynistic abuse, particularly the female teachers. There's aggression, there's threats of violence. There've been threats of knife incidents. Given the past history of the school, there's a lot of concern and worry about that. And the non-compliance of creating chaos. So the other issue is they've been rage baiting. And I don't know if people in this call are familiar with what rage baiting is. So this is where they wind up a student or a member of staff to get a reaction, and this is then being filmed and put out of context.
Okay, rewind. So this is staff being filmed in the school to try and get a reaction out of a member of staff in that moment. And what sort of things? I mean, have you seen this stuff online? Have you seen the teacher showed it to you or whatever?
I have, yes. I've seen various things that have appeared on TikTok which haven't been favourable, or where they've been filming teachers and, putting their heads onto, other things that they shouldn't be doing. And I have raised that with the academy. And that was part of the issue of, staff want mobile phones dealt with, which is another concern. So the teachers are dealing with mobile phone incidents on a daily basis.
Right. So is what's the mobile phone policy in the school? Do we know that?
Well, the mobile phone policy is, if it's seen, they're given a chance. But if it's not, if the child refuses to take it away, they'll call leadership, who will then come and take the phone off the child. But, this isn't working with this core group of students. So we've got, most teenagers are compliant with it, but it's this small group that, the rules don't seem to apply to.
Sure. And then, so give us an example then of this rage baiting. Give us an anecdotal example of what that might look like in the context of a teacher.
Well, one of the members of staff gave me this incident with a year 7 boy who was just minding his own business in the corridor. And they dared this student to go up and slap him around the face, which he'd done. And this poor year 7 student was stuck in the middle of this, totally innocent. And he was beside himself, quite rightly so. It's intimidating when you've got an older student doing that to you. And nothing happened to the student who had slapped this pupil. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I'm trying to work out in terms of the rooms you mentioned. I can't remember the names of them. Reset and was it reflection and reset or something like that? What happens in those rooms then? Are they sort of isolation rooms, or are they? What are they?
Reset is supposed to be where they follow an alternative curriculum and they do, interventions and things like that. As reflection is like an isolation room, but according to the people I've been speaking to today, it was complete and utter chaos in there. And lots of shouting and noise, not the sort of the quiet, reflective environment that it should be. So it's not serving its purpose at the minute.
Yeah. And how many teachers have gone out on strike out of the staff body?
Well, we've got two. The NASUWT and the NAU are both out on strike at the minute. So on Thursday we had more on a picket. We had near to 50 members of staff out on strike. We also had some that were on strike but didn't attend the picket because they got caring commitments, and that's fine. But we had the vast majority of the teaching staff out.
Yeah. And a 5-day strike, I mean, that's quite significant now in terms of the length of time.
It is, yeah. And we've been doing our best to try and resolve these issues. I've spent so much time in that place trying to, sort these issues, and a 6-hour meeting today, and we didn't achieve anything really.
So so you've had a 6-hour meeting. I'm just interested to know sort of what's being said in those meetings. I'm interested to know what's sort of being said on both sides in those meetings, if they're lasting that long and nothing's sort of getting resolved from it. And just before you answer that, Wendy, I'll just mention our partners on the show tonight, NASUWT Learning, who are a fantastic sponsor and supporter at Teachers Talk Radio, publisher of professional development books and resources for teachers around the world. If you're a teacher watching this, head over to the NASUWT Learning website, grab yourself a book. They have lots and lots of amazing ones on there, and huge supporters of Teachers Talk Radio and teachers around the UK. So thank you very much, NASUWT Learning. And of course, we have Teachers Talk Connect coming up on the 14th of March, which is a free event for all teachers to get involved in. It's in Manchester. It's on the Saturday, the 14th of March. Tickets are completely free to teachers, and we've got strands in all the major subject disciplines. So if you're interested in free CPD, then head over to Manchester, 14th of March. More details on the Teachers Talk Radio website. Sorry, Wendy, you were mentioning a 6-hour meeting today. Yeah. And I was just wondering, because there must be some interesting conversations there. Can you share with us sort of what's being said and any sort of insight into this?
Well, we had ACAS today. So ACAS were brought in to try and help resolve the dispute. So we were in 2 separate rooms, and we had the NEU, NASUWT, and our school representatives. So they were able to give, real valuable insight as to what is going on in order to try and resolve the issue. So we got a list of 11 things that we want resolving, and we give suggestions, and they were only able to commit to 1.
Okay, can you tell us those 11 things and the one that was committed
I'll
to?
try.
Yeah.
So the first one, we wanted the leadership team to be seconded to one of the other academies within the trust, because we felt that, it would be valuable for them to see a school that's running well, is well organized, doesn't have the issues that Tewkesbury does have, and that in return we get in Tewkesbury a leadership team to put things right, so that eventually, they could walk back in and things are done and sorted, and, everything's back on an even keel. That they said no to that one. We've asked for, one of the teachers from maths has been sent to the reset. He's applied for that job, got it, but they then need to backfill the maths teacher. So they've agreed to put out an advert for that. We wanted an apology from leadership as to how they've been treating the staff, because we've had a lot of bullying going on from leadership, and in particular when we suspended strike action in good faith, we then found out that staff members were being intimidated, which isn't on. We did that.
Can you tell us a bit more about that, the intimidation of staff, in terms of what actually has been going on?
So from what had happened is they've been sort of trying to say to teachers, you can't strike, it's the students who are going to suffer. Staff know this, staff know it, but they're striking because they want to make sure that the experience of those students there is positive. So it's small gains for a longer gain, if you see what I mean. And also the letters that have been sent home to parents were really, not good. They were very antagonistic, and staff were up in arms about it, because the community is actually supporting our teachers. They recognise that there are issues. And we've had so much support on the picket lines, and, parents emailing our respective unions saying, it's about time, we are worried about our school, because it's a small community, and that school is at the heart of it. And they're devastated to see what's happened. So, and staff are rightly upset about that.
Yeah, go on.
So coming back to the 11 points, they wanted more pastoral staff to support these students that are exhibiting behavioural issues. If they're not going to exclude, then we need bodies on the ground, to give the input on sort of behaviour, the interventions. And they did used to have this, but that has been taken away. So we wanted a commitment that they would allow for the appointment permanently of these members of staff. They have committed to 2, but the staff are saying we need 5 to support the work of the team leads, the pastoral team leads. I'm trying to think what else there was on there now. It's gone through my head today. Sorry.
What was the one they agreed to?
The maths appointment.
Okay. Why is that significant? Why was that on your list of things?
Because that maths teacher had been taken to cover reset. He'd applied for that job and got it, to deal with the alternative curriculum with Key Stage 3. But they were backfilling that with supply teachers that isn't good. And there had been no mention at the time of reappointing a maths teacher. So we did get the commitment for that.
So do you think the general approach, and again, we'll sort of, we've been through most things I wanted to cover, but there's still a few bits. Is the general approach sort of no exclusions, would you say? Is that a fair characterization of the approach?
The approach is, I mean, we're talking here fixed term exclusions, but they're minimal. So they do fixed term exclude, but it only tends to be for like half a day. And then they just carry on next day when they come in. The approach of no permanent exclusions is very much there. So there haven't been any permanent exclusions. And there's.
Do you think that exclusion would help? Is it about actually helping the situation? Is it about messaging? Is it, what do the staff feel would help them? It can't just be that. It must be other things too.
I think it's the key players, of which, there are 1 or 2 where they've reached the end of the road, and all those students are doing is coming into school every day and disrupting. That, they aren't doing anything within that environment apart from disrupting. And I think the staff feel that they need to exclude permanently 2 or 3 and then apply rigorously the behaviour policy to the remainder of that cohort that are disrupting would resolve the issue.
And what reason on those students? I know we've sort of touched on this, but just to be really clear, what are the reasons they're given as to why those students are not being excluded?
Well, the schools has just said, when I've said this, they've said it's not in our ethos of the Cabot Learning Federation.
What does that mean?
They like to be very inclusive. And I get that. I get being an inclusive trust. I get that. But you're never going to win with them all. And I think there's 2 or 3 of those students where their needs aren't being met. And because their needs aren't being met, they're disrupting. So we're not helping those students by keeping them on the school site. Their needs aren't being met, and neither are the learners within the environment. If you see what I mean.
Sure. Okay. Wendy, I think we've nearly finished. I want to ask you some general questions, actually, because obviously how long have you been working in an AS for now? It's quite a few years, isn't it?
I've been national executive since 2014. A long time now.
It's a good while. So paint us a bit of a. Let's move from this particular strike and school into a general sense of the situation. I mean, would you say we're seeing an increase in situations like this across the board, as in not necessarily to the extreme this one is with strike action, but what I mean is staff bodies, claiming that they're being sort of ignored or even in some cases blamed maybe for behaviours like this going on?
Yeah, I mean, I know from, serving on the national executive, and I meet regularly with national executive members from all over the UK, and we're all saying that behaviour is an issue at the minute. It really is. We highlight that on a monthly basis, that we are in a crisis with behaviour at the minute.
And in terms of violent incidents as well, I was reading something actually about, I can't remember the county actually, but they'd seen a massive increase in violence towards staff. Is that becoming a bigger and bigger issue?
It's yes, and much so. I mean, you've seen the incident in Wales at the end of last week, but it's more of a sinister term because I've been a teacher since the 90s, and it used to be a bit of back chat and nothing major, but now it's sinister. We've got real threats of violence, and of course the issue with knives. And the normalization of bringing knives in that we seem to have amongst teenagers at the minute. And that is huge cause for concern. But, people say, oh, they should have airport type scanners. I've worked in a school and we used to scan them with, wands every morning before they came on site. But they just got wise to this and they started hiding them in the bushes to collect them later. So it's not the answer. It really isn't. But it is a crisis. It really is.
You'd say a crisis at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And in terms of the you mentioned earlier, the word misogyny.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back to this particular school then, because that's quite a good, because we've been talking about that. It's probably a good sample case, but also just generally as well. Give us some, because that's quite a specific term for you to use for some of this. So, you're claiming it's misogyny, it's misogynistic. So what is it that's sort of making you draw those conclusions?
I think it's the derogatory abuse towards female teachers. Real sexualized comments or degrading comments. And that's become more common recently. It's almost like we've gone back to the 1950s, and there's lots of reasons for this. You've got the influence of parents, but also social media that and how certain characters are held in high kudos, across social media, and it's worrying. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the abuse of women teachers in the school. So what does that sort of, I mean, I'm guessing it's just misogynistic abuse. It's non-specific. It's just it is sexualized comments and
designed to embarrass female teachers, and also it's almost like a male supremacy. They think themselves superior to women teachers that are in the classroom, but not just women teachers, towards female pupils as well. And that's worrying, where we are, and it's supposedly a modern society. And, girls are becoming a bit complacent towards these comments, and that's not right. They need to be calling them out on it, but they almost don't. And that's quite shocking that it's become normalized in that way.
And you mentioned earlier in this interview, I think you said, you mentioned something about send and behaviour. You mentioned about that. Take us back to that just for a minute in terms of what you meant by that, in terms of, that side of things.
I think, people are attaching SEN needs to, behavioural needs, and some of them are, I get that totally. But when I was last teaching in a school, and I do odds and ends of teaching now, but not like I used to, it almost became, if a child was abusive to you, well, that's an SEN need. We can't do anything about that. But being disruptive, aggressive, rude is not an SEN need. That's a choice. And we should stop trying to medicalize that and hold them to account for that. And I'm not saying that, it's like Tourette's syndrome. That can't be helped, can it? That is an SEN need. But swearing at a teacher, degrading them, that's not an SEN need. That's a behavioural need. And the two are very different.
Wow. So, okay. So, we're hitting crisis point. What's your solutions then, from both from a personal perspective, from a union perspective? give us some idea of some of the solutions that you're sort of putting on the table to this for teachers who might be in this position within their schools, perhaps leadership teams. It could be anybody, it could be groups of parents, I don't know, but people who are concerned by this. What are your things where you're saying, well, this is what needs to happen to make it better?
To make it better, I mean, there's lots of ways of doing this. I think first of all, we need proper investment in SEN places. There's not enough SEN places. It's more about the curriculum and appropriate curriculum, rather than this very academic curriculum that we seem to be implementing that's results driven, and this obsession with results and league tables. There's Ofsted, they've got a part to play in this as well. We seem to be setting up schools to perform, to get a certain grade in Ofsted because we don't want a school to, fail, particularly with academies where they want to be seen as successful and getting more children within that trust. And, a breakdown in society. It's about training parents. Sure start centres that we used to have, when children were young, and giving them that support in how to parent. That's another aspect of it. But coming back down to government policy, and I think schools need the support to actually be able to exclude more easily, and the expectation that teachers don't go to work for this type of abuse. So supporting them there. And making sure that, if they do have to permanently exclude, that they're not going to be penalised or, ostracised because they do that.
Sure. I mean, do you think there was pressure in this example on the teachers to sort of maybe not ignore behaviours, but sort of go along with it? Or...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There was the expectation that they just got on with it and put up with it. But
how was that expressed within? How was that done?
I think staff were pressurised, and in particular when we first got involved as trade unions, a lot of pressure was put on the staff to not talk to people and to keep things internal, and that wasn't helpful. So there was that aspect of it. And also, the messages that have been communicated to parents haven't been helpful. They've been sort of quite dismissive of the concerns raised by the unions. And, teachers don't take strike action like this. They don't do it lightly, but it's not normal. So there must be a serious issue within the school for staff to have done this.
Wendy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective on things. I think it's really helpful to hear what's going on. Obviously, I reiterate that at the start we read out the statement from the school, and they were obviously invited to comment on this as well. So yeah, it's obviously a really terrible situation, really, from some of the things you've described and what you've said, that's happened and going on. So let's hope that it can be resolved.
Yeah.
As soon as possible.
I mean, we've set another 9 dates of strike action
with the school, with this one.
Yeah.
Okay. 9 days or dates?
9 days. So after half term, we've got another 9 days of strike action. And this is not, from us as unions. This is what our teachers there want, because
so is the school still open at the moment, or is it closed?
Well, this is it, because they've opened the school to years 11, 12 and 13 on strike dates, but there have been a number of issues with students not supervised during those days. So they've gone into classrooms and blocks that they shouldn't have been in and have been roaming around unsupervised. So staff are quite rightly, expressing concern as to how safe those students are on the days they're on strike. So, watch this space.
Just to say to everybody who's watched along, thank you very much. And if you have a comment to make, or if you have something to say on this, you can put a comment there on Facebook or Instagram or X or any of the other channels that were on LinkedIn, if you're watching it on there. Please do share a sort of comment, any thoughts that you have, any comments you have. Do get in touch with us if you'd like to have your say as well. info@ttradio.org. So feel free to drop us a line if you've got something to say on this, a point of view on it, then definitely drop us a line. So Wendy, thank you very much indeed. We will speak to you again. Take care, and thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Bye everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.